Across America, freedom is more than a word. It's a way of life. Generations of grit rest in the hands of those who build, defend, and sustain. Crafted to endure, tested in the wild, and relied upon at home, the next generation of the Ruger American Rifle is a bold evolution of precision and rugged reliability for responsible owners, today and for generations to come.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Wild Uncut podcast. We are coming at you from Bryce Canyon Mule Days in beautiful Tropic, Utah. Y'all will see McLean Meekum back behind us getting the arena ready for today's events. But I'm sitting down with saddle maker and former professional packer, Jeff Pace. And Jeff Pace Saddlery is your kind of hailing now. And you've been coming here since it started.
Since it started, yep.
You and McLean are pretty tight.
Yeah, I've known McLean for, I don't know how many years. Back in late 90s, worked for his uncle.
Yeah.
Doing trail rides in Zion and Bryce Canyon. When I was a young man, that was a good job. Yeah. Money was good, a lot of girls.
There's girls in Tropic, Utah. I have a hard time believing that.
It's tourists.
Oh, yeah.
But as I've got older, I just pack mules with my dog.
Yeah, and the girls are kind of on the sidebar now. Sorry, ladies. But Jeff is single, so that's really funny that you say that. So give everybody a little bit of background on, you have packed professionally in Wyoming. You have packed professionally in the Grand Canyon. You have been there, done that.
I've been lucky enough to travel around and work for a lot of good outfits and worked for a lot of bad ones too. Mm-hmm. But my first experience packing was in Zion National Park when I worked for Mangum's. Back in the 90s, we were packing 90-pound cement bags up the West Rim Trail there in Zion. And it was an experience. None of us really knew what we were doing. There was one guy that worked there that had some packing experience, and he kind of showed us the basics and trial by fire.
Yeah.
We had a couple of good wrecks, and I thought there's got to be an easier way to do this. And a few years later, I'd gone down to the Grand Canyon to see some friends there on the South Rim and was looking for a job, and it was coming on winter time, and I was going to just do trail rides down there, but they were laying people off for the winter. So my friend, he knew the guys over the maintenance, and I ended up working in the maintenance department down there on the South Rim for a little while, driving around changing light bulbs.
That sounds like an exciting job.
And Ross Knox was running the pack barn at the time, and he knew that I was trying to get over there, and he said, "You want to try packing?" And I said, "Well, I've never really done it, don't know what I'm doing." He says, if we can teach a monkey you can do it, we can teach you." So
oh boy, he had a lot of confidence in you. That's really great, Jeff.
So
oh boy,
they were floating a bunch of hay down the river because they needed the boat for something else to float some equipment out, and he says, "Come on and try it."
Yeah, so you start packing hay.
So we were just running hay from the river down there at Boat Beach up to the barn and filling that. And
what did that look like on your loads? How were you hauling them?
We had one guy at the boat, and we just had those roll-up panniers.
Oh, okay.
And while we went to the barn, he was making loads. We'd roll in, take the empty sling panniers, throw them off, throw hay on, and we moved like 300 bales in one day. Mm-hmm. Just back half-mile trip, back and forth. I don't know how many trips we made. But after that, Ross says, "You want to come work for me?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." Mm-hmm. And so I spent a total of probably, I think, maybe 12 years at the Grand Canyon, between working for Xanterra. I did work for the Park Service part of one summer. After that, started traveling around, worked in the Frank Church Wilderness in Idaho for a few seasons, worked for Colby Gines in Wyoming in the thoroughfare for a few seasons, and 5 seasons in Montana working in the Bob Marshall for an outfit there. Been lucky enough to have a lot of good friends, and packed in Alaska on a moose hunt for them. And the coolest thing I ever did, and I'm glad I did it, is when I worked for the Park Service in the Grand Canyon. Met a kid, and he worked for the Park Service down to Hawaii, there on Maui at Haleakala, and his job was, there's 3 cabins down inside the crater that people can hike down to, and his job was to take his string of mules and go down. They pack compressed fire logs into the cabins so people could stay warm, and we'd pack that in, and then pack all the trash out. So spent 3 nights, 4 days riding through the crater. That was awesome.
That would be incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in all of your experiences, you know, when you started to where you became, I bet it just transformed who you are as a muleman and how you do things. I did your clinic yesterday, and right or wrong, I've, you know, packed with my dad recreationally, you know, since I was a baby, you know. But boy, I sure, you know, watching you pack, it's so smooth, and you're so fast, and you use so little effort, where me, I'm wrestling with myself, and my hands are getting in the way, and you know, I'm getting it done, but it's not the same level of finesse. It's like watching a pro shooter versus amateur shooter run a gun.
It's all muscle memory. The more you do it, the more it comes to you. And if you do it the same way every single time, you're not going to forget anything.
Sure.
Most of the packing I've done over the years, I've been by myself. So I've had to learn and adapt and make it easy. Because when, you know, like when I worked in Wyoming, it was 25 miles into camp one way. I'd have a string of anywhere from 7 to 10 head. And every step counts, every minute counts. And doing it right from the beginning, if you'll spend an extra 10 or 15 minutes at the trailhead, it'll save you 2 or 3 hours on the trail.
Yeah. So explain what you mean by that, because a lot of people that are listening or watching might be novice, and you know, just growing up, it seems like the trailhead can be a little bit of organized chaos. You know, you've got loads that you have to weigh and balance and organize and assign a load to a mule and figure out string order. I mean, there's so many things that you're putting together. So kind of walk as on that professional side, our listeners and viewers through what you mean by the extra 15 minutes, making sure everything is, you know.
Making sure your loads are balanced, both sides, getting them on, making sure they're riding the same, making sure your hitches are tight, because if they're loose at the beginning, you're going to have to stop and fix it. The more times you stop, the more opportunity you give those mules to think of ways to mess with you.
I can't imagine why you'd say something like that, Jeff.
There are mules out there that, for their entertainment purposes, they like to screw with you. They don't do it out of meanness.
No.
They like to have fun too.
They're playing.
Yeah. You know, they have kind of a boring job. They smell the mule's butt in front of them, and that's all.
Nibble it, bite it.
Yeah, and that's all they see for the whole trip. So they're like little kids. You know, that's their entertainment. And if you can keep moving and not have to stop, because every time you stop, you're 15 minutes to 30 minutes minimum. No matter what it is. Even if you're whatever you're fixing only takes you 1 or 2 minutes.
It's tying everybody up and doing the whole deal.
And if you got young stock and, you know, that aren't used to that kind of stuff, you know, there were some strings that if I had to stop to fix something, I'd have to tie up my horse or my mule, tie up my lead mule, whatever. Sometimes I'd have to tie up or hobble 2 or 3 others so they didn't get into trouble while I was fixing it. And then unhobble, untie, put them back in the string, and then keep on going.
And that would have been something that you could have maybe avoided in the beginning. And I think a lot of being successful on the trail is being able to forecast a disaster before it happens and trying to say, okay, well, that doesn't look right. And it goes from everything, like you were talking yesterday, we were talking about blanket squirt on the saddle. When you're packing sometimes, and I've never, my dad and I have never been able to figure out exactly what causes it. So it's where the saddle blanket goes from where it's supposed to be under the saddle in the front, and it just literally will eventually squirt out the back. Well, when that happens, you have to stop, take the saddle off, take your load off, everything comes off, and you start from ground zero. And you were talking about that being, potentially a symptom of poor saddle fit.
95% of why pads squirt, whether it be a pack saddle or riding saddle, is because the saddle doesn't fit. If the saddle fits properly, chances are you're never going to have a problem.
Sure.
There are times, like if you have new pads, new equipment, for it to get broke in, sometimes they'll slip a little bit, but in my experience and talking with other guys, it's poor saddle fit.
Mm-hmm. So we had one pad that's a little on the older side, and we turned it around the opposite direction of where it had kind of a little old impression. And then it stopped squirting. Yeah. We're like, okay, well, we're going to run this and see, it's really frustrating. There's some things that, are difficult to avoid. So if you can kind of lead them off up front, that's the best way to do it. And that comes with experience.
Yeah. I've gained my experience from poor choices, poor decisions.
Roger that. Yeah.
Bad decisions give you experience.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes that's the only way to learn.
You
learn. I've worked with a lot of guys, learned little tricks here and there of how to do things, watching other guys thinking, ooh, I'm not going to do that. Because their poor choices give them experience, and you watch and see. And one thing, when I do my pack clinics, I tell people, learn as much as you can from as many people as you can.
Yeah.
Because everybody does it just a little bit different, and you got to find a way that works for you. Not everything I do is going to work for somebody else, but maybe they can take something that I do, adjust it just a little bit to make it to where it works for them.
Sure.
You got to have your own style, your own system, and if you do it the same way every single time, like I said before, you're not going to forget stuff.
Yeah.
If you get in too big of a hurry, you're always going to forget stuff.
Yeah. Don't
be afraid to take a little time and think about it, and then go from there.
Yeah. And it's easy, so much of packing, tying the knots, well, I guess it's not even called a knot. What do you call them, honey?
Hitches.
Hitches. Tying your hitches. I only know a few. So, and I'm only comfortable tying a few. My dad runs a one-man diamond. Forget it. It's way too confusing for me. It goes way on top. I got to be able to see. I'm too short. It doesn't work for me. My dad's buddy taught me the walker hitch, and then last year, Bijo Coy showed me the box hitch, which is very similar to the walker. You say it's basically the same thing. And that was a hitch is like, okay, I can get on board. I can do this. This is easy for me to manage. Even if I'm by myself and I've got my taller mules, I can still manage my loads and get in and out. And it is a big balance of what works for you. I've done a lot of mani loads because I have a really tall mule, and I couldn't tie the diamond, so I felt like, well, that's the only way I can get in and out at that point. My education was limited, or my options were limited to my education, and so I really, like what you say about learning, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, you should always learn from other people, because there's so many ways of getting in and out safely. There's always a little trick to make it easier on yourself, like you were showing me yesterday.
When you start to think you know it all, you limit yourself.
Yeah, sure. Or if you're too prideful to stop and say, hey, I could find maybe a better way. Like you showed me yesterday, the lash cinch. My dad's always taught me you throw it over the top and you catch it on the swing going under the mule. And he's adamant about it. Throw it over the top and you got to catch it on the swing. Well, like you say, sometimes you got to throw it over there a couple of times before you catch it on the swing. And you were like, hey, I just start on the opposite side. I throw it under the mule, let it land and bring the rope over the top. And I thought, well, how did I spend all these years doing this? And I could have just, instead of trying to be an acrobat catching a swinging lash cinch, you know, I could have just thrown it under them.
You know, I started doing that when I was down in the Grand Canyon. We packed, when we loaded up, we were inside the barn. Quarters were tight. And a lot of the mules we packed back then, there were some of them that would rather kick your head and let you touch them.
Oh, really?
They were pretty bronky. And that helped me make me be better, more out of survival than anything. Because you know, there's some mules when you threw the last cinch over and you reach down to grab it, they'd reach up and knock you in the nose. So.
And everybody thinks the Grand Canyon mules are so safe. No, I'm just teasing.
Well, the
seasoned ones.
The trail ride mules are pretty, I hate saying bomb proof.
Yeah, there's no such thing. Yeah.
But they're about as close as you could come to.
Sure.
You know, they've seen a lot. A lot of those mules started out as pack mules, went up and down the trail to get it, get that experience of going up and down the trail, the hikers and weather, rock falls, lightning, whatever. And by the time they become a dude mule, they've seen a lot. There are a few, you know, when we were there were a few that were only rode for 6 months or so by some of the guides, and then they would turn in the string. And a lot of and most of the outfits that I worked for, we didn't ride the good stuff. We rode the trash and everything else, trying to get them to where
the clients could ride them.
The clients could ride them. When you're leading a string of colt mules and you're riding one yourself,
things are colorful. Can be.
Yeah, your vocabulary changes quite drastically too.
Oh, I grew up with that vocabulary in my ears. I'm quite aware of that one. And it's interesting. So we'll talk about that, but I want to back up and talk a little bit about, you know, yesterday at your clinic, we went over gear. And for a lot of people listening, you know, they're going to want to know why you choose one thing over another. So I want to back up and talk gear. And so we've got, you know, when you're packing, you know, basic pack gear, you know, give everybody like a rundown, Decker versus Sawbuck.
This is straight up my opinion. I don't have a preference.
Okay.
Because any good packer can pack either one.
Sure.
And do the same thing on either saddle. With a traditional Decker, you're really not going to be able to pack panniers easily, but you can do it.
Because of the rounded bars.
Yeah, you can't hang the panniers on them, but there are ways around it. It's difficult, but I want a saddle that fits the animal, whether it be horse or mule. I've packed horses and mules, and if the saddle doesn't fit, it doesn't matter what style it is.
Sure.
If it fits, that's all I'm worried about. Because the comfort of the animal is my number one concern after my comfort. I come first, the mules come second. Because if I'm not comfortable and something happens to me, I can't take care of my stock. Or if I got guests behind me, I can't take care of them. So I look out for my safety, my comfort, and then
on down the line.
Good gear, good made gear, stuff that's not going to break. If you leave the trailhead with everything tied together, baling twine, you might have to stop and fix some stuff. But if everything's in good shape, you're good to go. You don't have to buy the most expensive stuff, but if you maintain it, it's going to last longer. It's going to work the way it's supposed to, and you won't have problems on the trail.
I brought Jeff a britchin this week that has seen better days.
But I have seen a lot worse.
I think that britchen's probably as old as me. To be honest, it's probably pushing, or not as old as me, but darn close. I mean, a lot of my gear, I was blessed to inherit from some great packers. You know, my dad introduced me to everything. Yeah, and he had pack saddles and gear, and then some of his friends, as they retired and they got out of mules, you know, we just kind of acquired their gear. So some of it has a lot of miles on it, but it, you know, it's the type of stuff that a lot of times you buy it once and it'll last you your lifetime.
Yep.
Or close in my case on my britchen, but you gave it a little bit of love, and I bought another one because, you know, it was that one will be a good, you know, backup or a secondary. But and you're right, when you're outfitting a string of mules, gear gets expensive. It's not a cheap hobby.
Nope.
But buying the gear that's going to work when you need it to work is important, because the last thing you need is a failure out there, because you have no way to fix things out there. It's really tough. You know, I travel with zip ties and a leather punch for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, it's important. You know, if I have something break on a bridle or something, I can zip tie parts back together and
get back home and get it fixed.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So, okay, so that's preference. Talk a little bit about on the saddles, like on the Decker, you know, my understanding and experience is that the cinches are, you know, the location of where they sit's a little more adjustable than on a sawbuck. Is that right?
On a Decker saddle, the rigging is adjustable, and you can move it forward, back, up, and down. So it is a little more versatile. With the sawbucks that are being made today, when the rigging's there, that's where it is.
Yeah.
And you just have to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're running, you know, maybe different sizes of stock, it might be nice to have some versatility. But it goes to personal preference, ultimately.
Most people that are, you know, not packing professional and weekend packers, they're packing one, maybe 3 mules.
Yeah.
And they have a saddle set for each.
Yeah.
For each one. I've worked places where we use the same saddle on 2 or 3 different mules, because we would rotate stock in and out, and some outfits, every mule, you know, they had one outfit had like 45, 50 head of mules, and every one of them had their own saddle.
Wow, that would be impressive. I do the gong show of who was this on last? We did write the names on some of the saddles, but now I have so many, and they're so, you know, I've got ones from 14.1 to 16.2 and everything in between. It's hard to get everything to fit perfect.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about, yesterday you were talking about saddle pads, and you know, I'm kind of reevaluating my riding saddle pad, because I think it's 1.5 inches thick. It's one of those wool, I'm trying to think of the name of it right now. I'm drawing a blank on it.
The 5-star ones?
Yeah, 5-star, Wells 5-star. And you're saying yesterday, you know, you want your saddle closer to the mule, and actually, you know, maybe
less is more.
Yeah.
When you start getting too thick of padding in there, in your mind you're thinking there's more cushion, but you're pushing that saddle further away from the animal, and you want the bars on that saddle to make full contact
with their back,
front to back, top to bottom. You want as much contact, and if you're further away, that raises everything up, and you start getting that, you know, that roly-poly, teeter-totter effect.
Interesting. Yeah, I have that thicker pad on my riding saddle, and I'm like, man, well, maybe I need to drop that down, because I have other pads that are only 1 inch thick. I thought I was doing the right thing, you know, by my mules, by getting that thicker, heavier, you know, nice pad.
If I'm just using a single pad, which I've done in the past, I don't go over 1 inch. My preferred, for like my riding saddle, my preferred, I just have a Navajo hair pad, and then about a 1/2 inch, either wool or something like that pad, and that works great for me.
Yeah.
With pads, I like natural fibers, especially if you're traveling long distances.
Yeah.
you know, those gel pads and some of the other stuff. Yeah, they do cushion a little bit more, but they also trap the heat in a lot more too.
You get those hot spots.
Yeah, they're great for like arena work, short stuff. But if you're out and going long distances, I want everything to breathe. Let that heat and that sweat, you know, come up through the pad. And that's what, you know, the wool skin on your saddle, that's what that's all designed for, is to draw all that away from the animal so they don't get too hot.
Just like us, when we're looking at clothing, we don't want things that trap the heat. We want to be able to have breathability and moisture wicking components, and same thing for our equines. Yeah, that's really interesting. I never really thought about that. My dad used to run one of those gel pads, and you know, he really liked it, but you know, his mule got a real prominent hot spot on her back, you know, and actually I don't have a mule really that doesn't have them. And you know, you go kind of beat yourself up, because I took my 2-year-olds last year and I didn't really put any weight on them as 2-year-olds. They had little saddle, one of them had a little riding saddle on, and I put saddle panniers on her, and she packed food. And the other one I had a pack saddle on, and she packed like sleeping bags and stuff like that. But both of them got little white spots on their back, and I thought, man, I feel awful. I've done everything I know how to do to prevent that, and here I am, their first season with no weight. So it's not weight related.
Not necessarily. Hot, you know, hot spots, dry spots, whatever term you want to use, is caused by uneven pressure of the saddle. In my experience, if it's a really small pinpoint, that's really bad. If it's a little bit bigger, yeah, it's still bad, but it's not as bad as one little spot. Rather than having, you know, like your hand flat versus your finger poking. And it makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah, it makes the job harder for them to do.
If they're comfortable, they're going to perform for you a lot better. You know, how you hang your bags, how much weight you put on them. Most mules could carry more weight than what you want to pick up and put on them. And take off every day, every trip.
I tend to stick to my loads 50 to 60 pounds a side. Then I can pick them up and put them on. But as soon as we start getting over that weight threshold, I have a hard time, and I like being independent. You know, I don't want to feel like I got to wait for someone to do it for me, because a lot of times, you know, it'll be me and a cameraman, or my dad's out there, and, you know, I feel bad. He's getting older. I don't want to have him have to wrestle 80-pound packs. That's not easy, you know, with age, or so, you know, ours are probably underloaded most of the time compared to what they could be carrying.
Well, if you put the maximum weight that they can carry, they can do it. But when you start figuring in terrain and all of that,
and then
age of the animal, build, longevity,
husbandry in general.
Lighter weight loads, they like that. And it makes their usable work life longer. You know, you could put 300-400 pounds on a mule and they'll do it, but if you do it consistently, it's going to shorten their work life.
I can't even fathom putting a load like that on one of my mules. That would break my heart to be like, all right, you got 200-pound sides. No way.
I tried to keep everything under a total of 200 pounds.
Me too.
Saddle not included. But just load weight. And that all depends. Depends on size, age. Again, terrain.
And condition of the animal.
You
know, they're just like us. You know, they'll start a season and you'll have everything fitted on your mule, and by the end of the season, everything's different. You got to readjust, and that's one thing I like. You know, people need to realize too, when you're doing this, as your mules become fitter, you have to adjust your gear and your tack, and it's just like us. We're always really excited, or at least I am, when I get an extra notch out of my belt. You know, it's the same thing with your mule. You know, as they lose weight and get in better condition, Um,
And that's the other thing too with saddle fit is those mules and horses, their body physique changes from spring to midsummer to fall.
that's right.
And it's always different. And and on some of those long trips,
It might change in the trip.
it'll change on the trip too, based on water intake, feed, and everything. So it may fit at the trailhead, but by the time you get to camp, it may not.
How, as a professional packer, how do you offset cinches going loose? Because, my mules, I've got 3 I'm leading usually at the most. Sometimes we'll pack 4. Last year we packed 4. And I'll tighten their cinches. I go around 3 or 4 times at the trailhead, and then you get an hour down the trail and they're loose again. How do you manage that with a string of 9 or 10 when you don't want to stop?
What I do is there's time, kind of like you, there's times where I'll snug a cinch 8, 9 times.
Yeah.
I may only pull that much,
But it adds up.
but over that time, I'll start at the front of my string when I'm saddling. Just when the cinch makes contact and there's a slight resistance, I'll stop. Because if you try to take it all in 1 or 2 pulls, they don't like that.
No, they don't.
They don't, and that's what makes cinchy
Mules.
animals and horses.
Yeah. Well, that happened to me last year with my 2-year-old. My dad, he hasn't been handling my babies. I've done all the work on them, and we went to leave, and he checked my little mule's cinch, and he gave her a tug like she was a 10-year-old mule, and she flattened out on the ground. And I have been working through that ever since. He just wasn't thinking.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, this is a baby. Like, she's 2 years old. She doesn't have a clue what you're doing. And he just cut her in half with that cinch, and poof, she hit the ground. And now she's just now getting where, because I'm trying to teach her, everything I'm trying to teach her is I want the lead rope on the ground, and I'm trying to teach him to saddle with the lead rope on the ground and kind of ground tie, if you will. Yeah, and she's just getting to where I can get back to that cinch and start cinching her without her wanting to back up or kind of shy away from me. But it's taken me almost 8 months to overcome that one experience.
And every animal's different. Some of them recover for something like that quicker.
Yeah.
And some of them it takes a long time.
Yeah.
And you just got to be patient.
Yeah.
Don't get in a hurry and.
Yeah. You always
let
got
it
to think
happen.
about where they are and preparing them. That's one thing with Ty Evans and his mulemanship is it's always about preparing them to do the job or preparing them for the moment. And as a packer, you're probably just throwing mules and they're like, figure it out.
At times.
Yeah.
You get young stuff. You got to figure out where they're going to work best. Mules kind of get clicky.
Oh, yeah.
They have ones they like and ones they don't. And you put them in the wrong spot
You're going to have a heck of a string.
or
Trip.
next to the wrong mule,
Yeah.
you're going to have problems.
Yeah. Even in the trailer, anything like that, like how you manage their personalities is so important. And that's learned.
Yep. And kind of go back to the cinches a little bit, but in the spring, or I shouldn't say spring, but early in the season when they're out of shape and they're coming off winter pasture and they're soft and soggy, you're gonna have to stop and tighten your cinches.
Yeah.
There's no way around it.
Gotcha.
Because you're not gonna be able to pull them tight enough to make the whole trip.
Yeah.
Because they're out of shape, you're getting them into shape, and they're losing that fat. You're gonna have to.
Yeah.
There's no way around it.
Yeah.
But once they become conditioned,
It gets easier.
it gets easier.
Less things to check through the more time you invest in your mule.
Yep.
And I think that goes with anything with the mules or equines in general. The more time you put into them is what you get out of them. If you want to show up once a year and lead them out and load an elk on them, boy, you might be in for a rough go every year.
Yeah.
But if you invest time with them every week and you're doing stuff with them, and by the time you get out there and you load them up to an elk, they're ready to do the job. Mentally, physically, and your relationship is there with them where y'all can work together well.
Yeah.
And that's probably something you build with your professional string as well, as that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
They know what to expect from you, and you're a good leader, and you know what to expect from them as a mule. And some mules don't necessarily rise to the occasion, but they kind of fall back to whatever level of training they got,
Yeah.
or whatever level of they can provide with their mindset.
I've been lucky enough. I don't know if it's, I don't want to say intuition, but been able to not, I don't want to say bond, but think like mule.
Sure.
Understand them a little bit more than some people. I've been told that I act like them many times.
Oh boy.
Maybe that's why I'm still single.
You and me both, Jeff. Don't feel bad. That's okay. You got an ornery streak in you. I'm hearing this now. I got you. Or mischievous. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe both.
Could be.
If we leave you unsupervised for too long, you're going to get into trouble. I've discovered that now.
I'm not going to say anything.
That's a good time. So tell me a little bit about packing into some of these remote places. You got your mules. You're strung out, and let's talk about grizzly bears. Mm-hmm. You're going into grizzly country. What are some things that you do with how you handle your string that might be different than a place without grizzly bears?
I never really did anything differently in bear country. The outfits that I worked for in Grizz country, 90% of the animals have been around them.
Sure.
They know what they are. Generally, they're not scared of them unless they come toward them. There's been times where I've come along and surprised a bear or two, and they've taken off and climbed up through the rocks. And that scared a few mules because the rocks are falling
Sure.
down. But for the most part, really don't do anything different.
So are you highlining on your trips for?
Every outfit's different.
Okay.
I've done everything from highline to having a picket mare,
Mm-hmm.
hobbling mules.
Mm-hmm.
One outfit, they had a grazing permit on, where their summer camp was. We'd have, depending on how many head of stock were in camp, we'd have 2 or 3 bell mares and put the bells on and just turn everything loose, keep a wrangle horse in,
Mm-hmm.
and then go get them.
Gotcha.
So however you want to do it is what works for you.
I tried that last year with a new mule. I had 6 tied up in the new mule, and I turned him loose. I thought, well, he'll never leave 6. Gone.
Mm-hmm.
2 days in the forest, he was gone. We put wanted signs at the trailhead for this mule, and we've set a trail camera up, so we have the most hilarious trail camera pictures of him at the trailhead. Luckily, it was fenced for a grazing lease,
Yeah.
so he couldn't go too far.
Well,
That was handy. But
I worked for a guy.
there are some that don't stick around, and you got to know their personality.
Yeah.
Lesson learned on that one.
I worked for one guy. Mule got out of the corral one day. He says, don't worry too much. He's got an ocean on either side. He can't go too far.
The ocean's a pretty big spread away. That's pretty funny. That is really funny. It's you do have to kind of figure out what works for you,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes sometimes I think we typically run a picket line,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes that's not allowed, or sometimes there's not trees
I try.
or good trees for it.
I try to avoid tying them up overnight to a tree,
Do you? Yeah.
just because it can be damaging
Sure.
to the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
You got to keep that in mind too.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt to be eco-friendly
Mm-hmm.
a little bit,
Yeah.
because we got to share it with everybody.
That's right, and it's got to last forever.
Yeah, we want to keep it so we can go back and see it again.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of places where camps have been trashed.
Mm-hmm.
Trees are dying.
It's sad to see too.
Yeah.
You know, it's sad to see when people, especially, you know, when you pack it in, you should pack it out. Leave it, if you find trash and you have room in your load, take someone else's trash out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that doesn't hurt at all. You know, that's good stewardship, and I think it's so important now. The mules and the horses in the backcountry, there's so many hikers and people that are not equine users that, you know, when people are stepping over horse dung on the trail, there can be some bit of resentment for that. So it's really important for us to set that higher standard of etiquette and in being responsible and being friendly and you know, being good stewards of mulemanship or horsemanship.
For sure.
And going out there. But so tell me about some of your experiences with other people, and you know, you got 10 mules in a string. How do you handle that? Depends. I know where you're going.
It's all different.
Yeah.
Just knowing the mules, knowing where they work best,
Yeah.
who they like, who they don't like. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
And whatever happens, you just got to deal with it. Yeah. There's no magic wand you can wave to
sometimes you
make
get
it
off
all
the trail,
perfect.
sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
You just kind of just work with what you got.
Mm-hmm.
What about your lead mule? When you're riding a mule and you're leading a string, what are you looking for in a mule? Do you want a fast mule or a slow mule?
In the strings that I had, I always tried to keep my older, slower mules at the front.
Sure.
And put the younger, little more athletic mules in the back, especially on a big string, because you go around switchbacks and stuff, and
It whips them in the back.
kind of like crack the whip. And you put an old slow mule in the very back, you're gonna have problems all day long. But there's been places where you put the worst one in your hand, so you can control them, or think you have control of them. Yeah. But you got to make them. I wouldn't say make them, but they have to have the mentality that you have the ability to make their life miserable. You don't actually have to do it, but if they think that you're the top of the pecking order, not them, get along with them a lot better.
Yeah.
If they think that they can buffalo you and do whatever they want, you're gonna have a long day.
You're going to have a long trip.
Whether that be a pack mule or a riding mule.
And that goes with owning them in general.
Yeah.
You know, if they don't have confidence in you as their leader, you're going to have a hard time. I mean, that's just the relationship as a whole, and that's why building a good relationship with your mules is so important, and spending time with them and establishing yourself as a leader, and spending the time to build that relationship and get the confidence, and it all translates with everything we do out there.
I always talk to the mules. I've had better conversations with the mules than I've had most people.
Tend to agree with you on that one too, Jeff. I hear you.
They don't talk back much, but
it's pretty handy that way, actually. You get to be the last word.
I had one guy tell me, he says, if they start talking back to you, you might want to think about changing your profession.
That's funny. That's funny. No, they're good, but you really can have a conversation with them without words, and that is a thing. I just reading their body language, and Ty did kind of point out something to me the other day. I got a mule, and she'll put her ears back a lot. And I'm like, oh, she's not happy, and I'll be doing something with her, and she'll pin her ears. And he's like, well, it's not always that they're not happy when they do that. And I'm thinking, I really haven't had an experience where I've had a mule put its ears back at me that I feel like he was happy. But then Ty points out, well, when they're on cattle or they're driving another animal away, that can be that but they're still being boss, at that point when their ears
They're focused on what they're doing.
Yeah, they're driven, they're focused, and you can tell a lot about what a mule is thinking on what his ears are doing. If his ears are forward, he's not, and he's alert on something ahead. If he's got one ear back, one ear forward, he might be kind of listening to you, but he's still focused up there. If they're both back and listening to you, or if they're just flopping, they tell a lot about the mood that the mule is in just by watching those ears. It's pretty incredible. It's it's like a thermometer on them.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what is this guy thinking right now? And kind of head off. Yeah, they're a really good alert. You probably saw that in the backcountry. They probably tell you when there's deer or elk faster than you realize.
Oh yeah. They let you know when something's around.
Or something's wrong.
Yeah.
It seems like, mules are, they got this strong sense of self-preservation, and they'll a lot of times just freeze and stop and refuse to do something if they're hurt or they, something's wrong.
Yeah. You can't make a mule do anything.
No. They got to go with you willingly.
Yeah.
You got to make it their idea also.
Yep.
Which is sometimes not easy to do.
No.
Ty says, make the wrong thing hard and the right thing easy.
Yeah.
Because they're always going to take that path of least resistance, and because they always want to feel good, just like us. They all want to feel good.
And they test you, see what you're going to do, see what you're made of.
With OnX Hunt, those who wander are never lost. Public and private land ownership, offline functionality, and 3D mapping allow me to hunt with confidence. And the elite membership comes included with draw odds and unit trends with hunt research tools, a membership to Hunt and Fool, plus a membership to Hunt Reminder to ensure you never miss a draw deadline. Download the OnX Hunt app and start your trial today. There are a lot of Americans that understand the value of hunting, but we all know that right now, national support of hunting is extremely volatile. It seems that with every passing day, our voice is diminished and the court of public opinion is not effectively hearing our side. We need advocates working on our behalf in Washington, D.C. to defend our freedom to hunt. And thankfully, when we need it the most, we have that advocate in Safari Club International. SCI's world headquarters are located in Washington, D.C., just blocks from the United States Capitol, which means that SCI is on the ground with our congressional leaders and federal agencies on our behalf, on behalf of the hunting community. SCI has an active political presence in all 50 states through their extensive chapter network and government affairs staff. If you have ever wondered why you should be a member of SCI, you shouldn't wonder anymore. Join us in the fight to defend hunting. Go to safariclub.org to learn more.
Novice rider on the mule. Next thing you know, they're going across the junipers and sage under branches. A mule will just rake them across the coals, and you put another person on there that knows how to ride, and they don't dare act like that. But it's the mules figured out that they don't really have a driver on them; they just have a rider.
A passenger, yeah.
Passenger.
It goes back to you got to be at the top of the pecking order. You got to be the boss.
They'll test you like that. Little things like that mischievous things. They'll be like, let's see if I can get away with this, and they'll ask, and if you let them, pretty soon they'll ask for more and more and more, and next thing you know, you might be going under a tree branch.
Yeah, I worked with one mule. He was a great lead mule.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the best lead mules ever been around. If you put a regular halter on him, whether it be rope, leather, anything, if you put a regular halter on him, he would lay on that lead rope and drag all day, every day, and never think twice about it. You put a chain halter on him, he's right there and never misses a step, never tightens a line.
Yeah.
He knows.
He's just like,
they know.
I'm not gonna mess with him today.
Yep.
Mess with him, mess with myself.
Learn that the hard way.
Yeah, and that is true. Actually, we run a mule halter on ours that are leather bands, and then they got chain in the back, and it's amazing how they never touch the end of that halter, but then you put a nylon halter on, and they will camp on that thing, and it will wear you out.
Wear you out, wear your horse or mule out that you're riding.
Yeah, 100%. My dad's got a really great mule. She's a great lead mule, but she's a Tennessee walker. That mule will do anything, but she is so fast. I wish she'd gear it down, sometimes if we had a long string, she as great a mule as she is, if I had 9 behind her, it wouldn't work. She's too fast. I think a slower mule in that position is better. Another interesting thing when you're packing, a lot of guys will just ride down the trail and bomb goes up behind them. I'm turned around more than I'm facing forward when I'm leading, when I got a string.
You can only travel as fast as your slowest animal.
That's right. Yeah. I like to watch my loads when I'm going down the trail. I like to see if a lead rope's too long. And we were talking the other day off camera. Last fall, I was struggling with, I felt like my lead ropes would stretch. And I don't know if I wasn't pulling them tight from the go and my pigtail there. But that is a thing too, making sure your lead rope length is right when you're going up and down hills, because if it's too long, your pack mule gets a leg through it and you can have an accident. And you're running, the rope you're running, what kind of rope is that you were talking about yesterday?
I like using a double braid polyester.
Okay. And that's basically a boat rope?
Yeah, they call it yacht braid, yacht rope.
Okay.
It's UV resistant, really doesn't rot or mildew. When it gets cold and frozen, you can still tie your knots. More importantly, you can get them undone.
Yeah.
Got good abrasion resistance.
And they're soft. They're really soft. That's one thing. When cotton, boy, you get cotton wet, it's impossible to deal with.
The only downside to any synthetic rope is if it gets in your hand and it moves to your hand at a high rate of speed, you're going to feel it.
Yeah. Well, I wear gloves when I'm leading a pack string anyway. I have a habit of wearing gloves. Ty was giving me a hard time the other day in class because my habit is wearing gloves. So I always put gloves on when because I've always got ropes or whatever I'm dealing with. I've got these fingernails and my hands get beat up out there. And Ty's like, you might take your gloves off to improve your feel for what we're doing right now. Yeah. And he's got a good point, When I got a pack string, I always have a glove on. A couple things I always have is gloves and a pocket knife.
Yeah.
What are your must-haves in your saddlebag?
I always carried a sharp knife, but I've only had to cut myself out of 2 wrecks.
Yeah.
Because that's a last resort.
Sure.
If you have a wreck and you just go in there and start cutting everything, what are you going to do then? You tie all your rope back together and try to make it?
Scab it together, yeah.
Cut, it's a last resort. I try to get things untied. Be calm, don't get in a rush. Sure. Don't get loud.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's the worst, yeah.
Because they feed off your energy.
100%, yeah. If you're panicked there, it makes it worse.
Yep.
Yeah, I got that sorrel mule. I bought her a year and a half ago, and I took her to Ty's stockmanship class, and it was really interesting. Because I've had her a year and a half, but I'm still getting to know her. It takes a while, really, when you have as many mules as I have, to get to know one, because you're not on them dedicated all the time. And as soon as I'd get in those cows, and I would go to holler at one of my team members, she'd come up, and I could just feel her. And it is really, pressure on a mule can be chain with your pack string, lead rope, your voice, your leg, your hand. There's so many things that can cause pressure to that animal, and yeah, your voice can make a big difference, especially, when things go wrong. If you're rattled and your energy is rattled and you give them that voice pressure and they feel it and you're scared, that just kind of adds fuel to the fire.
And a lot of times they don't understand why you're the way you are, but they're like, well, shoot, he's panicking, so I might as well panic. Yeah. The next mule's like, well, he's panicking, so I gotta panic, but we don't know why we're panicking, but we're just gonna follow along just because.
It's called contagious bucking.
Yeah.
Bucking can be very contagious, and it is a bad deal. I don't know why that was bucking, but boy howdy, we should all probably buck right now. I got a few that don't pick up contagious bucking. I like riding those ones that stand back and they look at them like, wonder why he's running across the meadow right there. So tell me a couple wreck stories, Jeff. I know you got some good ones.
Yeah, most of them were my fault, but
I like that he has extreme ownership on his. You know what? I could say the same for my wrecks, actually.
there was one wreck. I share responsibility in this. Packing at the Grand Canyon, back in the day, I'd work for a while there and then go somewhere else and come back, and we were packing. I was with this kid. And I didn't know the mules. He said he did, so I trusted him. And on the way down to Phantom Ranch, everything went smooth. There was one mule, I think, if I remember, his name was Tom. And if you put Tom too far back in the string, he'd hang switchbacks, and he was just playing around half the time. He'd walk off the trail and just like he didn't care. He's just having fun. On the way out, he said, I put him in the wrong spot. I should have moved him up further. And he asked me, he says, you think I ought to move him up closer? I says, he's been doing pretty good. We'll just leave him there. As we were coming up, we'd left Cedar Ridge, and we were coming up on the Windy Ridge, kind of a knife back ridge. It's only about 75 yards long or so. But the switchback, you come up and it comes straight back on you. So as you're coming up,
you're watching your mules below you.
But if he was in front of me, and those mules' feet were right here
by your head,
by my head. I had a young mule in my hand, Jody, and she'd rather scream stampede than go along with the program. So I was watching her come past some hikers, and she did pretty good. And as I turned around to get to the switchback, that Tom mule had cut the switchback.
Oh no.
The kid leading the string didn't see it. So Tom starts coming back towards me, and there was a little black mule right in front of him, and he started to pull her off. Right at that point,
the disparity of
was about 15 feet. Oof. And it's right above me. And I hollered at him, and he stopped. Not soon enough, and that black mule had her hind end off the trail, and there was a little bit of a rock outcropping in that switchback. She had her back feet on there. My hand is on her butt, trying to keep her from falling on me.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
I got Jody in my hand, trying to keep her from
freaking out
and spinning around. The mule I was riding, thank God, was one of the most broke mules there was. How I got lucky enough to ride her that day, I don't know. But I'm holding her. So, and we rode with breakaways there, baling twine, and Newton's law or whatever.
It didn't break.
It didn't break, and it wasn't going to break.
Because she didn't hit it hard enough.
And
yeah.
So I dallied off so Jody wouldn't go anywhere. And I took my knife and reached up and cut that pigtail. And when I did that, everything just went.
Yep.
And the mule I was riding, instead of just staying there, she spun.
Went down.
And I'm facing my string, and that black mule's still right there. The next thing I know, I got Jody facing downhill, got the lead rope. Next thing I know, I got that pack mule right between us. And She was loaded, and that trail's only 3.5, 4 foot wide, and it's not straight off, but it's a steep. If you fall, you're going to roll for a while. And I'm trying to keep everything calm. That black mule just turned around and went between the rock wall and my mule. I was standing in the stirrup on that onside. My right leg was on her butt, and that mule came between us. And there was one rock about that big, and she had all 4 feet on it. And when I made the trip the next day, that rock had moved that far. If it moved that much further, we'd all gone down.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that close. That was the only time. That's the only time I thought I was going to die.
Wow. Oh.
There's lots of times where I've been in a wreck and think, ooh, this is going to hurt. But that was the only time I thought I was going to die.
Yeah. Terrifying.
Yeah.
That is terrifying. Ugh. I can't even imagine what you'd do in that situation.
You just stay calm.
I had the darndest wreck last year. I'll tell my wreck story. Is my newest wreck story. Last year, I took my 2-year-old filly horse, and it was her first pack trip. And I was riding Cora, my sorrel mule, which is my new mule, and this was her first pack trip also. And I'm leading my veteran pack mule that I raised in saddle mule Otis, who's a big draft 16-2 mule. And I tied that little horse onto him, and I'm leading Otis, dragging the little filly, and I'm riding Cora. Well, the little filly keeps sitting back on Otis's saddle because she hadn't been ponied before that much, just in the field, not on a trail. This was her first kind of trip. We were doing it kind of as a little fun summer pack trip, and with my girlfriend Josie Coy, who's a handy gal. You probably know the Coy family. They're outfitting family, but it's just us girls, and she's got her own pack horses. And anyway, that saddle on Otis just started kind of getting rocked to the side because this little horse was leaning on him. And I said, Josie, I want to prevent an accident. I said, let's just stop here. I'm going to fix Otis's saddle. And we're getting ready to do some pretty good climbing. We were heading to some sheep country. I said, I don't want to have an accident up here. So once that saddle gets off centered, it's real easy to roll it. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, I'm going to fix this. So I get off Cora and I go to tie her up. Well, Otis is grazing, and he kind of grazes past Cora. Well, that little horse is following him, and I don't know what happened, but somehow her lead rope looped around my saddle horn, not dallied, but looped around it. And when Otis grazed past me, I didn't notice this happening, and it pulled that little horse tight. And she kind of jumped forward, and she stuck her leg through my saddle stirrup on my riding saddle. And the three of us go down the hill about 15 feet to a juniper, and I'm on the ground. I'm trying not to get ran over because it's like this ball of mules. And they stop. Cora freezes. The little horse flips herself sideways on the ground. Her legs stuck through my stirrup. Her head tied back to Otis. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not good. Because I thought, I'm going to shoot her. She's got her leg stuck in my saddle stirrup. She's going to break her leg. And all Cora's got to do, which is my new mule, she's never done a pack string, all she's got to do is bolt right now, and she's going to drag this filly who's flipped. And I'm going to have a shit show. Like, it's going to be bad. And they all just laid there. Nobody moved. Everybody was like frozen in fear. And I cut that little horse's breakaway, and she sprung free, and she jumped up with such vigor, and she's young, didn't have a load on, Popped her leg out of the stirrup, ran 50 yards and looked at me, and I thought, boy, this is the luckiest day of my life. I have never had a wreck quite like that, and I got lucky. They all just froze.
Sometimes it just happens that way.
They just froze. And to imagine having a horse's leg through your riding stirrup. I mean, if you can imagine what that looks like, it is a terrifying sight. And it was just me, because I had my head down, and I'm tying up my mule, and I wasn't watching my string at that moment, and it takes 1 second, for little things. Like you say, if you have a wreck, it's usually your fault.
Well, yeah, most of the wrecks that I had is out of pure laziness. Look back, saddle's a little crooked. Oh, we're almost to camp.
It'll ride.
It'll ride, I'll make it. Next thing you know, you're 200 yards from camp reloading everything.
Yeah, that sucks. That sucks. I did my first pack trip without my dad and with a cameraman. And, you know, with me, it's like, okay, well now, that's the first time I've done without my dad and a cameraman, and I'm responsible for everything, the stock, the whole deal, and there's a lot of pressure. Plus I'm trying to make a TV show, and I'm trying to hunt, and, you know, I'm trying to do all these jobs, and I had a tent. It was like a 20-pound tent. I thought, well, I'm just going to top pack it because it doesn't weigh a lot, and it's the right length just to sit over the panniers. And I threw a box hitch over it, and I thought, well, actually I threw walker box, whatever, over it, and I thought, well, it'll be fine. It's not gonna shift. It's top packed. And I look back, and my mule has the whole saddle, the whole outfit is completely sideways on him, and he's just powering down the valley. The whole thing had rolled because that tent had slipped just to the side, a little bit on top, and that 20 pounds was pushing on that one side and rolled it. Stop. Lesson learned. Okay, tie that off. Don't rely on my top pack to hold it in place. You know, just, it's little things like that you do that now I know better, you know. Now I know if I've got 20 pounds up top, I better make sure that 20 pounds can't rock at all left or right of that load. You know, it's got to stay 100% centered. But it is, you know, without learning these things. And I'm lucky that I got a dang good mule that he was just willing to put up with it. You know, you say there's no such thing as bomb proof. He's about the closest thing I've got to it. I mean, he's been solid. In situations like that, you know, I had decker hooks on a pack saddle that you just took off for me, and we were jumping creeks, taking salt in to do trail cameras, and those hooks came off and flipped on the ground, and he stood there and looked at me like, you idiot. You gotta put this back on. Oh, but it's nice to have good forgiving stock.
Yes, for sure. It's
good. What are some tips you could give people that are just getting into the packing world and
pay somebody to do it?
That's a heck. I wasn't expecting that answer. Have somebody else do it for you. Yeah.
Just take your time.
Yeah.
Get to know your stock. Good equipment. Well-maintained equipment.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? Just looking over your buckles every year, oiling your leather?
Well, not, you know, look at your equipment every time you saddle. Ladder goes, breechings, breast collars, straps, buckles. Look at everything. Make sure it's, you know, when you're saddling up, make sure everything's not going to break when you're out on the trail. So
do the best you can to prevent it, because stuff can pull tight or weird things happen and it breaks anyway. We gotta go. We got stuff to do. So thank you all for tuning in for this episode. If you all want to check out Jeff's stuff, Jeff Pace Saddlery is the name of his company. And I appreciate your time today, and thank you for joining us here at Bryce Canyon.
Let's go do it.
Thank you, guys.
When conditions get tough on a mountain hunt, your gear must be tougher. Making every opportunity count means selecting equipment that will not fail. Any condition, anywhere, Hornady Outfitter ammunition is designed to perform. Available in a wide range of cartridges from .243 to .375 Ruger. When you're looking for a hard-hitting, deep-penetrating bullet and cartridge that performs in the most rugged environments, look no further than Hornady Outfitter ammunition. Thank you all for listening to the Wild and Uncut podcast. If you would like to hear more, be sure to not only watch, but subscribe to my Pursue the Wild digital series airing on Carbon TV and YouTube. And while you're at it, follow me at Kristy Titus on Facebook and Instagram.